The breaking point. The crystalline spires of Luminara pierced the violet sky like perfect geometric daggers, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons in precise, calculated patterns. At the apex of the tallest tower, Talia stood motionless, her silvery skin catching starlight as she gazed down at the immaculate city below. Every building, every street, every movement of her people followed mathematical precision, a society built on the pursuit of absolute perfection. Talia's slender fingers traced the edge of her datapad, its screen displaying the final results of her latest engineering project: error, deviation from standard parameters. The same message that had haunted her for the past 3 cycles. In a civilization where imperfection was considered a form of corruption, her inability to conform had become unbearable. The cool wind whispered through her iridescent robes as she took another step closer to the edge. Her heart, all 3 chambers of it, beat in an irregular pattern that would have horrified her people. Even her biological responses refused to follow the prescribed rhythms. I can see at least 12 safer ways to enjoy that view. The voice, warm and distinctly human, startled her from her contemplation. Talia turned sharply, her large, opalescent eyes focusing on the figure standing near the tower's access point. He was shorter than her people, with tanned skin and dark hair that seemed to defy any attempt at orderly arrangement. His environment suit bore scuffs and repairs, signs of use that any Luminaran would have considered shameful. "This is a restricted area," Talia stated, her voice carrying the musical tones typical of her species. "Your presence here violates multiple protocols." The human's mouth curved into what she recognized as a smile. "Name's Nathan. I'm part of the terraforming team working on the Eastern expansion. And I'm pretty sure whatever you're planning violates some protocols too. My actions are, logically sound, given the circumstances." Talia felt an unfamiliar sensation in her throat as she spoke the words. "I am defective. My contributions to society consistently deviate from acceptable parameters." Nathan took a careful step forward, his movements deliberately slow. "You know what we call deviations from parameters on Earth? We call it innovation. Breaking new ground. Thinking outside the box." He gestured to the city below. "All this perfection, it's beautiful, sure. But it's static. Dead things are perfect. Living things grow, change, make mistakes. Mistakes are inefficient," Talia recited, but her voice wavered. "They waste resources and delay progress." "Really?" Nathan reached into a pocket and pulled out something small and irregular. "Take a look at this." He held it out to her, a small, rough crystal formation that caught the moonlight in unexpected ways. "Found this while surveying. It's what we call a desert rose. Formed by pure chance, no 2 alike. Completely inefficient, totally useless, and absolutely beautiful." Curiosity, that dangerous, illogical impulse she had fought all her life, drew Talia away from the edge. She studied the crystal formation, noting how its chaotic structure created patterns she had never imagined possible. "Your species embraces such disorder?" she asked, unable to hide her fascination. "We don't just embrace it, we seek it out. Some of humanity's greatest discoveries came from mistakes, accidents, and people who refused to follow the rules." Nathan's eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The universe itself isn't perfect, you know. Stars explode, galaxies collide, black holes break every rule we think we understand. And yet, here we all are, living proof that imperfection can create something wonderful." Talia's fingers closed around the desert rose, its rough edges pressing against her palm in a way that felt surprisingly right. "My latest project," she found herself saying, "I designed a new type of energy converter. It doesn't follow standard templates, but it could increase efficiency by 47%. They rejected it because the design was unconventional." "Sounds exactly like the kind of thinking we could use on the terraforming project," Nathan said. We're actually struggling with power distribution in the new sectors. Fresh eyes, new approaches, that's exactly what we need. The first rays of dawn began to paint the sky, and Talia realized she had moved completely away from the edge. The datapad with its error message seemed less important now, overshadowed by the simple beauty of the crystal in her hand and the possibilities in Nathan's words. Perhaps, she said slowly, tasting the dangerous freedom in the words, there are alternatives I haven't considered. There always are, Nathan replied, his smile warming something deep inside her. Want to grab a coffee and talk about them? Fair warning, human beverages are about as far from perfect as you can get. For the first time in her life, Talia felt her mouth curve in an unprescribed expression, a small, uncertain smile that nonetheless felt more right than any programmed response ever had. I would like that, she said, and took her first step toward an imperfect future. Echoes of understanding. The human establishment they called a cafe assaulted Talia's senses with its chaos. Mismatched chairs surrounded tables of varying heights, while the air carried a complex mixture of aromas that defied categorization. Nathan led her to a corner table where the morning light spilled through warped glass, creating random patterns on the scratched surface. So, Nathan said, placing two steaming cups between them, tell me about this energy converter of yours. Talia's fingers traced patterns on the ceramic cup, its imperfect glazing catching at her sensitive fingertips. It utilizes quantum fluctuations in a way that hasn't been attempted before. The energy matrix follows organic patterns rather than geometric ones. She paused, waiting for the dismissal she had grown accustomed to. Instead, Nathan leaned forward, his eyes bright with interest. Like the way plants grow toward light? Natural patterns tend to be more adaptable than artificial ones. We've seen that countless times in terraforming projects. Exactly. The word burst from her with unexpected enthusiasm. By allowing the energy to flow through natural pathways, we could reduce resistance by. She stopped, realizing her voice had risen above acceptable levels. I apologize. I became inappropriately animated. Nathan's laugh was warm and unreserved. Inappropriate? That passion is exactly what science needs. You should see our research teams on Earth. Arguments, celebrations, complete chaos, but that's where the breakthroughs happen. As they talked, Talia found herself drawn into Nathan's descriptions of human scientific endeavors. They were messy, emotional, and often accidental, everything her society condemned. Yet they had achieved things her people had never dreamed possible. Your species embraces failure as a path to success, she mused, sipping the bitter drink he'd called coffee. It seems paradoxical. Life is full of paradoxes, Nathan replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her pulse quicken irregularly. Like how two species from different worlds can sit here and find common ground in the mathematics of the universe. A chime from her neural implant interrupted the moment, a reminder of her scheduled duties. I must return, she said, rising with practiced grace. My absence will be noted. Wait, Nathan caught her hand, and Talia froze at the unexpected contact. His skin was warmer than hers, slightly rough, and sent unfamiliar sensations racing through her nervous system. Meet me tomorrow at the terraforming site? I want to show you something. Against all logical judgment, Talia found herself agreeing. The next day, she stood at the edge of what the humans called Project Genesis, a vast expanse where terraforming machines were gradually transforming the harsh landscape into something new. Nathan waited for her beside a large vehicle covered in dust and dents. Your equipment requires maintenance, she observed, noting the vehicle's condition. Nah, these old rovers earn their scars, he patted the metal affectionately. Each dent tells a story. Hop in, I promise it's safer than standing on tower edges. The rover's interior was a jumble of instruments, tools, and personal items that spoke of long hours spent in the field. As they drove across the changing landscape, Nathan explained their progress, setbacks, and victories. Talia found herself fascinated by the way he described problems not as failures, but as puzzles to be solved. They stopped at a ridge overlooking a valley where massive machines were reshaping the terrain. "Watch this," Nathan said, pointing to where a new atmospheric processor was starting up. The air shimmered as the device began its work, creating a cascade of colors that danced across the sky. "It's beautiful," Talia whispered, the word feeling foreign on her tongue. Beauty wasn't a concept her people typically discussed, efficiency and function were what mattered. "You know what makes it really beautiful?" Nathan turned to her, his face animated. "The fact that it almost didn't work. The original designs failed completely. We had to rebuild it 3 times, each failure teaching us something new. Your energy converter, it could be exactly what we need to stabilize the process." Talia felt something shift inside her, like pieces of a puzzle finding new arrangements. "My superiors would never approve collaboration with." "Then don't tell them," Nathan suggested. "Work with us unofficially. Sometimes the best changes start small, in the spaces between the rules." The proposition was dangerous, illogical, and completely against her training. Yet as she watched the colors paint the sky, she felt a sensation she had never experienced before: hope. The calculations would need to be precise, she found herself saying. The integration of organic patterns with your existing systems would require extensive modeling. Nathan's smile was like the dawn breaking over the terraform-ed valley. "I know a perfect place where we can work on it." "Well, actually, it's perfectly imperfect, a lab some of us set up in one of the abandoned mining caves. No oversight, no regulations, just pure research." As they drove back to the city, Talia realized she was experiencing another new sensation: anticipation. The rhythms of her life had always been predictable, measured, controlled. Now, for the first time, she was stepping into unknown territory, guided by a human who seemed to find joy in uncertainty itself. The 3 moons were rising as Nathan parked the rover at the city's edge. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, his hopeful expression making her heart beat in those strange, irregular patterns again. "Yes," she replied, and this time her smile came without hesitation. "I believe I would like to explore more, imperfect possibilities." Cultural collision. The abandoned mining cave had become Talia's sanctuary over the past cycle. Unlike the sterile laboratories of her people, this space hummed with creative energy. Scattered datapads displayed complex calculations, while holographic models of her energy converter spun in the air, their organic patterns casting ever-changing shadows on the rough walls. "The integration is working better than I expected," Nathan said, manipulating a 3-dimensional representation of their combined technology. His sleeve was rolled up, revealing a small burn from yesterday's failed experiment, a mark he wore like a badge of honor rather than hiding it as her people would have. Talia was about to respond when her neural implant buzzed with an urgent notification. Her body tensed as she read the message. "The Oversight Council has scheduled an inspection of all engineering projects. Tomorrow." Nathan's expression darkened. "They can't know about this. Your energy converter isn't just innovative, it's revolutionary. If they shut it down now." "Citizen Talia," a cold voice echoed from the cave entrance. "You have deviated from your assigned protocols." 3 Luminaran compliance officers stood in the entrance, their perfectly pressed uniforms gleaming in the dim light. Leading them was Chief Inspector Raven, his silver eyes reflecting disapproval as they swept over the chaotic laboratory. "This unauthorized collaboration ends now," Raven stated. "Your behavior patterns have become increasingly erratic, Citizen Talia. You will submit to immediate psychological recalibration." Nathan stepped forward, placing himself between Talia and the officers. "You can't do that. She's done nothing wrong, she's trying to help both our peoples." "Human Nathan Reed," Raven's tone grew colder. "Your presence on Luminara was a calculated risk. Perhaps an error in judgment. Your species' chaotic influence. A violent tremor cut through his words, sending equipment crashing to the floor. Emergency alerts flooded their communication channels simultaneously. Multiple atmospheric processors failing across the eastern quadrant. Nathan read from his datapad, face pale. The terraforming network is collapsing. Without stability, we're looking at a cascade failure that could poison half the continent. Raven's perfect composure cracked slightly. Impossible. Our systems are flawless. Flawless doesn't mean flexible, Talia said, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. She pulled up the holographic model of her converter. The rigid energy distribution can't handle the planetary changes your terraforming is causing. But this can. Another tremor shook the cave. Warning sirens began to wail across the landscape. We don't have time for bureaucracy, Nathan urged. Her design could save thousands of lives, both human and Luminaran. Raven's eyes narrowed as he studied the model, his training warring with desperation as more alerts flooded in. The design is unorthodox. Unpredictable. Like life itself, Talia said softly. She turned to face her people's representative directly. You taught me that imperfection is failure. But what if it's adaptation? Evolution? The very force that allows species to survive? The ground shook again. Through the cave entrance, they could see the sky turning an ominous color as the atmospheric processors continued to fail. Show me, Raven commanded finally. Talia's fingers flew over the holographic controls, explaining her design with passion she no longer tried to hide. The energy doesn't flow in straight lines because nature doesn't work in straight lines. It adapts, finds new paths, strengthens through challenge rather than breaking under it. Nathan added his own insights, pointing out how the design could integrate with the existing terraforming systems. Together, they painted a picture of possibility that even the rigid Luminaran officials couldn't ignore. Implementation would require breaking 17 standard protocols, Raven noted, but his tone had shifted from dismissal to calculation. Then break them, Nathan challenged. Sometimes rules need to bend so worlds can survive. Another warning siren pierced the air, and Raven made his decision. You have one chance to prove this theory correct, Citizen Talia. Failure will result in immediate exile. What followed was a blur of activity. Teams were mobilized, equipment requisitioned, and Talia's converter design transmitted to manufacturing units across the affected zone. Nathan worked tirelessly beside her, his creative problem-solving complementing her precise calculations in ways that defied conventional logic. As they raced against time, Talia felt something profound shifting in her understanding of the universe. Every improvisation, every quick fix, every moment of inspiration that didn't follow the rules, they were all part of a larger pattern, beautiful in its complexity. Energy distribution stabilizing in sectors 3 through 7, an operator reported. The poisonous color in the sky began to fade as Talia's converters came online, their organic energy patterns adapting to the planet's needs in ways the rigid old system never could. Nathan caught her eye across the command center, his smile carrying a warmth that reached deeper than any protocol. In that moment, Talia understood that she had crossed a line from which there could be no return. Like her energy patterns, she had found a new way to flow, to exist, to thrive. And somewhere in the chaos of saving a world, she realized she wouldn't want it any other way. Defying perfection. The aftermath of the crisis transformed Luminera in unexpected ways. Where once perfect geometric patterns had dominated the cityscape, now organic energy flows created subtle variations in the light, casting ever-changing shadows across the crystalline surfaces. Talia stood in the Grand Assembly chamber, facing the High Council as they reviewed the data from her converter system's implementation. The numbers are undeniable, First Speaker Meridian announced, her tone carrying a mix of reluctance and wonder. Energy efficiency has increased by 63%. Atmospheric stability has improved by 48%. And yet. She paused, gesturing to a holographic display of Talia's design. The patterns defy all established principles. Perhaps our principles need to evolve, Talia suggested, standing straighter despite the murmurs her words caused. The crisis proved that adaptation is not just beneficial, it's essential for survival. From his position among the human diplomatic delegation, Nathan watched with barely contained pride. The burns on his arms from manually adjusting converters during the crisis were still healing, but his eyes shone with the same intensity that had first caught Talia's attention. "We have received a formal request from the Human Terraforming Authority," second speaker Orion announced. "They wish to implement your design across all their colonial projects. This would require—" He seemed to struggle with the words, "ongoing collaboration between our peoples." Talia felt her 3 hearts beat in that strange, pleasant rhythm she had come to associate with possibility. "The universe is vast," she said. "Perhaps it's time we learn to see beauty in its chaos rather than trying to impose our version of order upon it." The debate that followed lasted for hours, but Talia noticed something different in her people's responses. Questions that would once have been dismissed as heretical were now being considered. Ideas that would have been rejected for their irregularity were being examined with cautious curiosity. As the session concluded, Nathan approached her, his movements carrying that casual grace that still fascinated her. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first arrived on Luminara, I thought your people were like your buildings, beautiful but cold. I've never been happier to be wrong." Talia felt her skin shimmer with iridescent patterns, a physiological response her people usually suppressed, but one she no longer tried to hide. "You taught me that imperfection can be strength. That chaos can birth creation. That—" Her words were interrupted by an urgent message on their datapads. The experimental converter in Sector 7 was showing unusual readings. Without discussion, they both headed for the transport platform. The site was a maze of swirling energy patterns when they arrived. Talia's converter had done more than stabilize the atmosphere, it had created something entirely new. The interaction between the organic energy flows and the terraforming process had accelerated plant growth in ways neither human nor Luminaran science had predicted. "Look at this," Nathan breathed, kneeling beside a cluster of crystalline flowers that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. "They're feeding off the converter's energy pattern. Evolution in real time." Talia's scientific training urged her to classify, categorize, control. But as she watched the plants grow in beautiful, unpredictable patterns, she felt something else, joy in the unknown. "Your influence has corrupted more than our technology," a familiar voice observed. They turned to find Chief Inspector Raven approaching, his usually rigid posture slightly more relaxed. "Our younger citizens are asking questions. Challenging protocols. Some are even suggesting that our pursuit of perfection has become stagnation. Is that such a terrible thing?" Talia asked, watching as Nathan gently studied the crystal flowers. Raven was quiet for a moment. "I have reviewed historical records from before our society chose the path of perfect order. We were different then. More volatile, yes. Less efficient, certainly. But also more alive?" Nathan suggested, standing and brushing dirt from his knees with casual disregard for protocol. "Perhaps," Raven conceded. "The Council has appointed me to oversee a new initiative. We wish to establish cultural exchange programs with human colonies. To study how—" He seemed to search for the right words, "how chaos and order might find balance." Talia felt Nathan's hand slip into hers, his warm fingers intertwining with her cooler ones. Once, such public display of emotion would have horrified her. Now, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. "Balance," she repeated, watching the crystal flowers sway in patterns that defied prediction yet held their own kind of harmony. Not the absence of chaos or the tyranny of order, but the dance between them. The 3 moons of Luminara rose over the horizon, their light playing through the new growth in ways that created ever-changing patterns across the landscape. In that moment, Talia realized that her people's search for perfection had been misguided. True perfection wasn't a state to be achieved, it was the endless process of growth, change, and discovery. And standing there, her hand in Nathan's, watching their two worlds' influences combine to create something entirely new, she understood that some equations couldn't be solved with logic alone. Some needed heart, instinct, and the courage to embrace the unknown. New horizons. One full planetary cycle had passed since the crisis that changed everything. The highest spire of Luminara, where Talia had once stood contemplating the end, had been transformed into an interspecies research center. The rigid lines of its architecture now flowed with organic patterns of energy, a physical embodiment of the changes sweeping through her society. Talia stood at a window in her laboratory, watching human and Luminaran scientists working together in the garden below. The crystalline flowers they discovered had become known as harmony blooms, their unique properties providing insights into both energy patterns and biological adaptation. More importantly, they had become a symbol of what could happen when different worlds collided and created something new. Lost in thought? Nathan's voice carried a warmth that still sent pleasant shivers through her neural pathways. He approached with 2 cups of coffee, a habit she had grown to appreciate, despite its irregularity. Remembering, she replied, accepting the cup. One cycle ago, I thought my inability to conform was a flaw that needed to be eliminated. Now those same flaws are helping reshape our understanding of the universe. Nathan leaned against the window frame, his casual posture a stark contrast to the formal Luminaran scientists below. You know what I remember? A brilliant woman who just needed someone to remind her that breaking patterns isn't always breaking things. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of first speaker Meridian, accompanied by several members of the Human Scientific Coalition. The officials' expressions held an unusual mix of excitement and apprehension. The results from the outer colony tests are in, Meridian announced without preamble. Your harmonic energy distribution system has successfully adapted to 12 different planetary environments. The Human Coalition is proposing. She paused, as if still adjusting to the idea, a joint mission to explore its applications in deep space. Nathan straightened, his eyes lighting up with that familiar spark of adventure. Deep space? You mean? A joint human-Luminaran expedition, one of the human scientists confirmed. We're detecting unusual energy patterns in the Carina Nebula that match some of the theoretical models derived from your work, Talia. We believe your understanding of organic energy flows could be crucial to unlocking their secrets. Talia felt her heart's flutter in that now familiar irregular pattern. Such a mission would require years of preparation, protocols would need to be established. Actually, Meridian interjected, we were hoping to launch within the next quarter cycle. The Council has determined that excessive preparation might limit the potential for beneficial chaos. Nathan nearly choked on his coffee, and Talia felt her own surprise manifest in a shimmer of colors across her skin. Her people, who once planned everything to the smallest detail, were advocating for spontaneity? There's more, Meridian continued. Given the unprecedented nature of this mission, we will need leadership that understands both order and chaos. Both human ingenuity and Luminaran precision. Her silver eyes fixed on Talia and Nathan. We want you both to head the expedition. The proposal sparked a flurry of discussion, but Talia's attention was drawn to the garden below. A new batch of harmony blooms was opening, their crystalline petals catching the light of all 3 moons. Each flower was unique, their patterns never repeating, yet together they created a harmony more beautiful than any precisely planned garden could achieve. Later that evening, Talia and Nathan stood on the observation deck, watching the stars that would soon become their destination. The space between them had grown comfortable, filled with understanding that transcended their different species. You know, Nathan said softly, when I first came to Luminara, I never imagined I'd end up planning a deep space mission with the most fascinating woman in the galaxy." Talia felt her color shifting reach new intensities. "And I never imagined I would find perfection in imperfection." She turned to face him fully. "Or love in chaos." Nathan's hand found hers, their different physiologies fitting together in ways that defied mathematical prediction yet felt absolutely right. "So, what do you say? Ready to explore some chaotically perfect mysteries together?" Talia's response was to pull him closer, breaking at least 3 Luminaran protocols about public displays of affection. But as their lips met, she couldn't help but think that some rules were meant to be broken, some patterns meant to be changed, and some loves meant to transcend the very laws of nature. The 3 moons cast their light over the city, their combined illumination creating ever-changing shadows across the transformed landscape. Somewhere in the vast universe ahead, mysteries waited to be unraveled by minds that understood both order and chaos. But for now, in this perfect moment of imperfection, Talia and Nathan simply held each other, 2 beings from different worlds who had found in each other the ultimate truth, that love, like the universe itself, thrived not in perfect order or complete chaos, but in the beautiful dance between the two. As they stood at the threshold of their next great adventure, Talia realized that she had found something far more precious than the perfection her people had sought for generations. She had found purpose in innovation, beauty in difference, and most importantly, a love that proved some equations weren't meant to be solved, they were meant to be experienced, one wonderfully unpredictable moment at a time.